Many of you have written to me asking me to talk about the situation going on in the country Colombia in South America. And I want to start with that today. The New York Times has a good piece from yesterday, updated this morning, summarizing what is going on there. There are now at least 19 people who have been killed in what are being called pandemic related protests. But more specifically, the protests are because there's been a tax overhaul connected to the pandemic, which has been proposed. That has turned into anger from Colombians about poverty, about inequality, about economic conditions. And indeed, as the New York Times now reports, at least 19 people have been killed. Hundreds have been injured during days of continued protests in Colombia. Tens of thousands of people have taken to the streets to demonstrate at least proximally against a tax overhaul, which is, as the government claims, necessitated by a financial hole created by the pandemic. And the president, Ivan Duque, announced he would withdraw the current proposal and put together a new plan, saying that this is a necessity for the country. Monday, the country's finance minister announced that he would be resigning, but the protests continue and the repression continues. And now it is becoming a larger protest about poverty in Colombia, about unemployment in Colombia, about inequality in Colombia, all of which has been exacerbated by the pandemic, as we've seen in many countries. And I've talked a little bit about what's going on in Argentina, my country of birth. Incredible. Anything you can imagine related to the pandemic has happened in Argentina. Officials with vaccines in the trunks of their cars, continued inflation out of control, overwhelmed medical systems, strict lockdowns on paper that are actually not being followed, in particular by the countries. I don't really want to use the term elite, but upper middle class and many in the professional class just living as if there is no pandemic. So there's many examples. Brazil, we have talked about, but this really sort of taking on a unique shape and character in Colombia. And the protests in part are continuing because even though the economic proposal has been pulled and will be replaced with something else, the response from the state has been extremely heavy-handed, to put it lightly. And there have been instances of police abuse captured on video. I'm not going to play them because we'll just create problems for ourselves. One of the unfortunate realities, this is an aside, but I think a relevant one. One of the realities that we live with in the United States is that it has, for decades, generally speaking, not been a part of protocol to show the violence that takes place in war, when there is law enforcement repression. And so we in the United States have a much more sanitized view of what this violence looks like around the world. And as a result of that, the policy is that if we include a lot of the violent footage, it's not just about demonetization. Our videos can actually get blocked altogether from different platforms. And so the video is out there if you want to go look for it. We won't be including it in this broadcast, but there are all sorts of videos of police brutality, video where young protesters are seen shot by police. There is an instance of a 17-year-old, Marcelo Agredo, who is a ninth grader, sent out to march with his brother, shot by police, died after kicking a police officer going by on a motorbike. And now we are seeing a sort of propaganda battle that's also taking place between those who say the police and the military are now in danger and they need to be able to defend themselves, a sort of tacit defense, really, of the violence against many of these protesters. And of course, those saying this is a harebrained idea from the government in proposing this economic reform. And then now that very same government, because there has been an outcry against the proposal that they made, are repressing protesters and all sorts of video that has been removed from social media already, and all of the things that we often associate with these circumstances in Latin America are taking place. Now, there are numbers that have started coming out. I mentioned already tens of thousands of protesters and certainly hundreds of injuries. The counter narrative is, well, 540 police officers have also been hurt. And there have been endless instances of property damage. And police say we've identified 17,000 people who have broken the public health measures because they were protesting without wearing masks. And so there is always a counter narrative. But the big picture here is that much like many other countries, a financial shortfall, the proposal that was made economically would have increased tariffs on all sorts of everyday goods and services, which would make them even less affordable for much of the Colombian people. And that caused an outcry. And then now the protesters are getting knocked around. So we're going to continue following the situation. All sorts of different Colombian news people and musicians and actors that I follow on social media have been actively posting about this. And not enough people in the United States even know that this is going on at this point. So that's the latest. And these numbers, 19 dead, there's a reason why it's at least 19 dead, because in all likelihood, that number is going to go up, tragically so. And we will have more about this maybe tomorrow, maybe Friday, and certainly by early next week. One of our sponsors today is COVID Rescue Fund. COVID Rescue Fund is helping small business owners who have lost their businesses during COVID. There are over 100,000 small businesses that have had to close their doors since the pandemic began. There are many organizations out there helping businesses who are still open to stay afloat, but COVID Rescue Fund is one of the few organizations working to help businesses reopen who have had to close. COVID Rescue Fund crowdsources funds to provide grants up to $100,000 for these owners to create new businesses. I would implore anyone in my audience to help COVID Rescue Fund in their mission by donating at covidrescuefund.org. All money that you give is going to the mission, not to compensating people who work for the organization. The founders of COVID Rescue Fund are big fans of the David Pakman Show. Let's help them bring back as many small businesses as we can. The link is right underneath this video.